Okay, so you can probably see we've sanded down this one pretty much absolutely everywhere. Now don't get me wrong, this isn't one of those jobs which is a 2-minute bit of filler, polish over. It's quite a little bit of work. I'm going around to making sure, say, these little steps underneath are all okay and the wing joints and everything. It's just one of those things, taking your time. See it as just part of the building process. Don't sort of shy away from filler and thinking, oh, nightmare and all the rest of it, gotta get in there. It's horrible. If you work with it, you'll find it'll work a lot easier. So we've got up here, you can probably see this area around the front here, all very nicely done like that. We've got nice seams lines coming along here. We've got no obvious massive steps. Obviously got a lot of filler going around here and smoothing around, but it's all nicely smoothed out now with no real problems whatsoever. So I'm really happy how that's gone. Obviously it still needs a bit of polishing work, so we use our polishing sponge, the green side, just to go round and make sure we got no scratches in the paintwork and everything else like that, because particularly along these vent sides down here, it did have quite a lot of work, to tell you the truth. Quite a bit of sanding, so there is various scratch marks which we need to get rid of, otherwise they're just going to transfer through to your primer and then through to your paint, and then eventually you'll be able to see them when you're totally finished. So that one's really done. Now the other thing we spoke about was making a few little changes to them, perhaps exhaust nozzle noses and things like that. One of the things with this kit has always had a slight problem was its nose shape. Now it's one of those ones going to be quite hard to show, but this is a resin replacement. So if we get the camera to lock it in here, whoops, there we go. That's that. If we get the camera to lock in on my hand here, you can probably see the tip of the nose on obviously the kit part being the styrene one versus this resin one is a lot more pointy than obviously this one. Now there's a couple of choices with this. Quickie Boost do a version of it. L&M, to be honest, this is one of the L&M ones that I've had here for a while. Nice casting, although we have got a couple of little bubbles on it. Now the only trouble is I can't speak for the Quickie Boost one, having never had it, but what you do have to look out for is how you position it on the nose. Because normally when you come along and you pop it on the nose, there's no guide to see how it is, and obviously you do have that natural droop down that it has. So the easiest way I find is to look at it head on and then side on, and when you're happy of how it is, you can sort of say, yeah, that's really about the nose, because it sort of continues the droop going downwards like this, whereas if you have it up the other way, you'll see that the nose literally will point upwards if you've got it in that type of angle. But manoeuvring it round will give you a rough idea. Now it's not the best fit in the world, and we have got, if you look at the end here, some marks, some holes and things like that in this one. There again, one of those things, bite the bullet with it. So obviously we're dealing with a resin, so what I'm going to do is just put a couple of drops of glue just around the edge. Now I have had to clear this up a little bit, to be honest. So we're just going to go in a bit of resin all around the edge. Okay, and then we're going to poke this one in. Now I know I've put it to around about that position. Okay, and what we're going to do is just give it a quick squirt of kicker, purely for me to speed up. Now the nose on this one, this is the L&M one, is a slightly tiny bit wider, which to be honest I don't mind because I can sand in. If it was the other way I'd have to fill. Trust me, I'd prefer to sand, but you might be able to see on that end of that nose now, just down here, we've got a little hole, okay? Now there is a few others all around, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to backfill this hole. So I'm just going to pop a tiny bit of super glue in the end, alright, and then I'm going to poke it with a pin. And that worked a treat, because now it's disappeared. So we're going to put more super glue on there. Nice bubble on the top of it, just like that. And all we're going to do is poke it with a pin to get the air bubble out, because there will be a bubble, and you should find you can poke him out. Because the thing is, if you don't get the air bubble out, what will happen is, when you sand it, it will just open up again. Okay. Last time, because obviously the air is quite a big one on this one, to be honest. So that one's in. Squirt with some more. Blow all around, and there we go. There's our nose in position now, so we're nice and happy with how that is. Now obviously it's going to take a bit of sanding to get in, but we can sort of do that on sort of phase 2 of the sanding, if you like, because now what we can do is sort of move along and install things like the tail planes, they can go in there and everything else. Then we can come around and rescribe it. Okay, so now we're all smoothed down and we've gone round and sanded and everything. Now it's a good idea just to make sure all your surfaces are down and fine. So use an old sponge. Obviously you can get very fine grits of sponge, you know, we've got them down here like the polishing one and everything else. But if you use an old warm one that's hardly got any edge, all you're trying to do with this particular sponge is take out any scratches that are in the surface absolutely anywhere. So just run it over the entire model. Make sure leading edges of wings are all nicely blended in. You've got no gaps so you can see down them. Flat ends on the edge, tapering down the back. So you're just taking care of all those little joins and seams. I've got some little ones just to take care of in here. Just to blend all these in and just make sure they're all okay. So if you're taking care of all your sanding and filling and all the little things like that, then the next thing you can come into is the rescribing. Now, obviously rescribing is one of those things where, you know, with a little bit of practice, you're going to get better at it. But certainly to start with, there's a few little tips and tricks I'll show you here to help improve it. First of all, obviously the quality of your cutter. Now, we've got two here. We've got the standard sort of Tamiya P cutter. There's lots of different versions of it, but basically you've got this hooked type blade on the end, you can see like that. Or you've got the more finer ones. Now, this is a trumpeter. This is relatively a cheap one here. It's only something like £3.50 for this little scribe. It's got a little tool, but you can get these other ones like dental tools which do it. You're better off sticking with, to be honest, something quite hardy like a P cutter for doing straight lines just for the moment. And there's some good reasons for that, and I'll show you why. This one here will make relatively a perfect cut every single time, where something like the finer ones you need to just tweak how you use it sometimes. So this one really is your sort of go for it. You want to be doing with a normal P cutter something like this, obviously your straight lines, things like that. Now obviously as we've been doing this MIG here, we've used loads of filler and we've probably covered up lots of holes we shouldn't have. Okay, so down here we've got various templates. Now these are quite flexible and bendy, so they'll bend around panels and things like that to an extent. The other thing we've got here is dino tape. Now dino tape is great. It's quite thick plastic, okay, but it's sticky. So we can stick it to the model and use it like that. So if we just cut ourselves a chunk just off for the moment, because it's sticky, you can use it and place it multiple times. Okay, so obviously when you're rescribing, there's a few ways you can do it. You can follow your original panel lines. We've got one down here, which is still here, but it's pretty well covered up with filler dust and all the nasties that go with it. And you can just drag your actual scribing tool along these panel lines just to make them a bit easier. So all we do is come along, and all we're doing is pulling backwards. We're not pushing down at all, and we're letting the weight of the actual cutter do all the work. Okay, and that way, look, we can run it round and we're just following where we're going. But because there's something for it to follow, it's pretty straightforward. Okay, now if we're in a situation where perhaps we've sanded it and we've lost where the panel line is going to actually go, then what we can do, just down here, we can line our guide up, put the P cutter blade in the panel line, then push your scribing tool up against it. Okay, this one's got a slight kink to it. Same thing again, we're just pulling it along, and we go along and we put in our new panel line. Obviously it's quite tricky for you to see like this, in there just like that. One thing that does happen is when you're pulling it along, you can overshoot, and that's where dino tape comes in. So if we just cut ourselves a little square off the end, okay, and all you do is peel your backing off, he says, which is easier said than done. So you need your nails, or use your P cutter. Okay, now this is sticky on the back, so if we pick out a line, we're just going to put it on the panel line right where it stops. Okay, so it's just like there. And what we do, we just pop a sponge under here so you can see. Alright, then grabbing our tool again, we just pop into the groove. Okay, line it all up with where it's going to go and run, and you pull along and you get as far as you go and it just stops. That stops you going off and perhaps then being out of a panel line and scooting off. But it just helps you control it. But it said don't push down with this. You want to be using a pulling type action rather than a pushing. So once you're done, you can peel it off. It should come off, and we've got a couple just down here, so we're just going to pop it in just down there like that.
P cutter goes in the groove again, and a good example, we can just pull it back and lock it in, just move it along to the next panel line, because these are already done, so they're full up with a bit of ooh. Okay, just down there like that. Perhaps you've got one where these wing joins are, we don't want to go too far off over the wing, and we can go round them, and it just acts like a backstop to stop you going literally too far. So we've got a couple of other little ones just down here, so we're just going to stick those onto these two that are literally just down here like this. Okay, then starting this way, we're just going to pull it clean off the edge, and then obviously we want them to be a nice sharp finish, so we're pulling them up from the bottom and in, just in like that. And that is how you do it. So you can obviously use this one for complex curves as well, because bending a bit of tape right round might be a bit of a problem, okay? So if you've got a very thin curved surface, what you can actually do with the donut tape is cut it in half, just so because obviously we're only using the edge of it. Okay, and then all we do, we're going to peel the backing off. And because we're thinner, it should conform easier. So what you can do, something we've got down here like the nose, where we've lost the panel line. Trying to get it in. We can just rest it over the nose like this. Okay, and you can come along with your P cutter and just pop a nice fresh line in. Again, it's just a dragging little tiny bits at a time. Right the way over, and then as I say, you can peel off and replace. You might think, right, okay, we've got quite a tricky one is going to run around here. So there again, we've got a couple of funny ones around here, for instance, that on the main fuselage body. Okay, well, we did lots of sanding, so we can just rest it in just down here like this. So first pass, just make it nice and light, and literally it's just this one going to go right the way down and right the way over, and puts our new panel lines in, no problem at all. And that's the thing, it's just taking your time with it, doing one at a time, and just popping them all back in. Now if you can see where they are, that's all well and good. It's half the battle. It's the bit where you can't see them, that's where you have some problems. I'm trying to angle this towards you as well, so this one just comes along to here. Okay, and then we have a little dog leg on it, but we've got another one that's going to run right across the body, and you'll find that the actual tape should be able to use multiple times like this. So this is quite a good one because it's over a curved edge, just like so. Okay, now we've got two that need to join up. We've got one just down here. What we want to do is it to go all the way over. Little trick you can use, if you use a little razor saw like this, you should be able to place it into the groove of the original one, and it should be quite small, and then just curve it right round the thing. So it will cut out a tiny little slither for you, and then hopefully you can see it goes all the way underneath and all the way around. This is the one we're looking at. Okay, so it starts from the top and it curves all the way around, and then we'll go all the way around and we can join it up with the other side, and away we go. And it's a little bit thin in the middle, so we're just going to make it a similar depth in this area in here, and there we go. So that's really straightforward, just taking your time. Little things like leading edges of wings, this razor saw is great for doing around there, because you just place it in the original panel line like this, okay, and then you just cut and curve and perhaps drag and just pull it right the way over. And when you come to the underside, you should be able to just place it in like so and just drag it out, and that will meet up with the original two, that one we're going to need to do. But let's say, again, we've got filler dust and nasties all in here. The other thing as well, when you're doing, and you've got a curved surface, you can use a needle, like I've got in here. Okay, I don't know if we've got any curved ones particularly anywhere around here. Let's have a look on the bottom. But then what you can do, you can use your templates like we've got here, multiple little holes. So if we just go over one, just to sharpen it up a bit, we've got one just in here. So we know the size, we hold it on, we've got a needle, I've got it tucked in there nice and tight. Okay, and then all you do is very lightly just scraping it around in circles. And do it just like that. And that way you can take your time. Now if you find it very rough on the top, all you do, come along with some liquid cement. I'll just bring you out a little bit. Okay, little liquid cement on top. And what that'll do is melt down the edges, and then afterwards you can just go around with a pin when it's dry and just clean it out just a little bit, just like that. So I'm going to go around now and rescribe the entire underside of this, because there's quite a bit to do on here. Some of it we can clean out, so obviously you've got these like white lines down the bottom here. It makes for very, very easy rescribing, because literally we just pop the P cutter in and drag. Okay. But as I say, with the P cutter you can pretty much get it anywhere. The only thing the little one is handy for, if you've got to get into little tight areas, perhaps the P cutter won't fit, that way you can place it in just like this. Okay, and then just same thing again, dragging it back, but because it's thinner it tends to get in nicer tight little areas, so you can get in there and do little details. The only drawback to it is it's not quite as clean a cut as perhaps if you were using some of the others, certainly like the P cutter. It does tend to rough kit a little bit. If it's doing that, just change the angle up and down and you'll find it gets a bit of a cleaner cut. So I'm going to go around and rescribe the rest of this. Okay, so now we're on to the photo etch bit. So we've gone around and cleaned up everywhere on this, and we've used a little bit of the actual thinners, cellulose thinners, to go around and do all the underside areas and everything else like that. Now it's one of those ones where you say take your time with it, it really will pay off. Even if you've got the most complicated filler job in history under here, it can be fixed, just taking your time. And then with your rescribing, if it goes wrong, use a little bit of liquid putty to put it right, and then just carry on and start again. So one of the last things we need to do before we can start getting this into paint and really moving on with it is get all the photo etch. Now this is where Eduard comes into its own, because obviously Eduard's bread and butter, it has been for the last few years now, is working with photo etch parts. They've pretty much gone down to a fine art now. It's very straightforward, but very complicated at the same time. It's complicated if you let it get complicated, because obviously when you see these frets, you know, like this and everything else, it's all these tiny little things, and some of them can need bending and shaping and everything else like that. Remember, you don't have to use every single one on here. If it's a little bit intimidating, you can certainly take your time, pick out perhaps the major ones, and as your skills progress with it, especially with bending and things like that, then you can move on to putting every last one on here. But 9 times out of 10 though, I won't use something on here. Perhaps I might make it out of something else, or perhaps I'll stick with a kit part, or perhaps you're hardly ever going to see it and it's not worth actually doing it. So in this case, there's a couple of nice little touches on here. First of all, it's these two at the top. You can probably see in the light. Okay, I've put them on because obviously it's going to cover up a little area that's not particularly brilliant, bit of moulding with a nice piece of photo etch. So you've obviously got all the details in there a lot better. Okay. Now on the underside, there's a few nice big ones that are going to go on, which are going to vastly improve the underside. Okay, so what you're going to need, 2 ways of doing it. You can either use a PVA glue. Okay, so if you're using a PVA glue, you might want to use something like Gator glue, it's got a nice good strong grip, or your normal sort of hobby glue. The great thing about these things are, at the end of the day, you can position them and maneuver them, and if you're not happy with that, it's quite easy to remove them without too much fuss. Okay, whereas if you're going to use a super glue, which is the way I do it, it does tend to be a one trick. You put it down, it's very hard to get it off again, because you're going to bend it out of shape and you can have all types of problems. So what you can actually do is actually just snip these out with thin scissors. Now I know a lot of people want to put it down on a hard surface and cut them, but I find if you push down, you tend to bend the small little areas and the things like that. So we just snip out. I've already got a few out on the go, so we just need to do one. But all we're doing, top of the scissors, literally just nipping off the actual bits. Now if you're in a situation where they might fly off, okay, what you can actually do is get yourself a little bit of Tamiya tape. Okay, just like so, come along, stick it
before you make your last cut. Alright, and then you can just come along like this, cut it off, unpeel, and you'll be left with your part just on the edge, just like that. So you haven't lost it. So if you are dealing with little tiny bits which tend to literally, you cut and they fly off and onto your desk, and we've all done it and you never see them again, you can put them on like that. Just be careful as you're getting it off the tape, because it can be a little bit of a nightmare. So we just pop that down to one side. As I say, I've got a couple down here already. So just down here on the belly, we've got some pretty naff markings down there, so we can vastly improve that. So we've actually got a little pool just out of shot. I've got a little puddle of super glue, okay? So we're just going to use an old cocktail stick or toothpick, picking up a little bit, and all we're going to do is go for the corners to start with. Just put little blobs in the corners. If I do so you can hold it, and then what we'll do, we'll drag them over and just line it all up. But I do tend to find in the corners is best, something like this. Okay, we bring you in. Okay, so we've got them in. All we're going to do is join them up. Okay, just a little bit, tiny bit in the middle. Don't go over top with the super glue. Super glue, the less you use, the faster it is it'll stick. I'm just going to scrape them in amongst each other. Okay, so we're just going to grab our part now. Now I'm using here a medium super glue. So what that actually means is it's not going to dry instantly you put it down. If you use a thin one, as soon as you put this on, it'll be dry. Also, I've got time to talk to you guys and everything else and work it out where it's going to go. Okay, but that's the thing to it. So we can just put that down in there. And you should have a few moments just to position it before it starts to fully go off. So you can get in there like this and you can push it with a blade or your scissors I'm doing here. So you're happy with how it's all lined up. Okay, and then just push it all down nicely. Don't put your finger on it. If you put your finger, the glue's going to come through and it will stick to your finger before it will stick to anything else. Now if it's flat and all okay, you can let it go. If it's not, what I tend to do, touch of kicker, squirt the item, okay, and then all I'll do is hold it down with the scissors just to bend it lightly into shape. Now I know what you're thinking, it's okay, these are nice flat areas, and if you give it a blow it speeds up the drying. But there we go, that's in there just like that. Very straightforward, very nicely done. Now it's saying, I know what you're thinking, that's okay on flat areas, but what do you do about a curved surface? Okay, well what you can actually do, you can get hold of something like this. Now this is just a little pack that I picked up years ago now, but actually what you've got, I've got a square piece of plastic, clear rod, okay. I've also got a curved piece just like this, and then this one here is a mixture. It's got a curve on it, it's got a flat, and it's got like a right angle. It's like a triangle, but it's got little curves in it as well. So actually what you can do is bend the photo etch round them. Now you've got to remember it will spring back to a certain extent, but it will hold somewhat of its shape. So if we just take one off here to show you, this is parts, I think there's 68, there's 2 of them, and they are tiny little devils. So I'll just snip these off. I'm going to hold on to these as we snip, and hopefully we won't lose them, just for speed here. Little tip, if you get a little bottle, put them down. If you put the parts in there, 2 more here which we'll use in a moment. You can pop them on there and you know where they are. If they're on your desk, sometimes you can catch them on your arm or something like that one almost got lost, something like that, and before you know it, you dragged it on the floor, you never see it again. So what we're going to do, we've got our little tube here, so we're just going to pick up one of these tiny ones, okay, and all we're going to do is pop it on the rod, hold it down with our nail, hold the other side, and literally just pushing it down, okay, or you put your finger over it or something, and we're just putting a small little curve into that shape. So if we just lean in there, so when we come up to replace these ones on here, we make sure we have got the right ones. They are going to be in the right area, so it is this one just down here. But when we come along with our glue, very light little mark of it in there, because obviously it's a tiny part. The smaller the part, the smaller the glue. Okay, we can pop it down
And then we should be able to just drop it into place. Just on here, like so. You can probably see it. And it's curved to the correct type of curve. Now don't panic if it's not exactly the right curve, because if you come in you can actually push it with your finger, but I don't know how well the camera is going to be able to lock in to showing you this, but it's actually a pretty good fit, that one. So if you get different size ones, don't forget, use stuff around you, use bottles, you know, anything that's sort of hard. If it's just a gentle curve but on a big item, use something like this, but you'll be amazed what you've got around your desk. Another good one is paintbrushes. You can bend them around. Normally they taper off, so that way you can get a bit of a curve. But if you over curve it slightly, so it's a little bit too much of a curve, when you put it down, you can push it with a blade, as we said before, to hold it in, and you'll find it will conform. Same way is like for convexed as well. If you want them to bend inwards, exactly the same type of principle with it. So by working to the same of bending them in and everything else like that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get these stuck on the bottom like this, and then what we're going to do, we've got to do some folding work, and I'll show you about that in a moment. Okay, so the next area we can work on is this top one around the cockpit. Now, one nice little touch with this kit is you've actually got an entire new frame at the top, which will really complement the actual resin tub itself, because the resin tub is fantastic, okay? It's pretty straightforward. What you've got here is part, remember it is 51. Now 51, this is twin, and it's just bent back on itself. Tiny little slither of super glue between the two, and we've stuck it in. So I've already pre-checked it, and I know it fits, so I'm just going to put another pool of super glue down. As I said, I wouldn't worry too much about using PVA glue for this stage, purely because PVA glue has a nasty habit when you sand it of rolling up. Okay, so all we're going to do here, we're just going to pop this in, and we're just going to run a slither of super glue. Remember, the less you use, the more you'll get squirting out, and the better the finish. Okay, so we're just going to literally very gently run just a little bit. Just make sure you get to the edges, because you can always wipe it off afterwards. Okay, then we take this part. There's no up and down to this because it's just literally a fold. You're going to have to tease it in to the rear and both sides of the cockpit area, because it tucks just down on the inside. Once it's in, it actually goes a very, very nice fit. Okay, and that goes in just like so. Okay, so you can probably see it in there quite nicely, and once it's in, it is a very nice fit in there, just like that. Okay, so don't worry about glue squirting out the sides, because we can very gently sand it down, but to be honest, that's a pretty good fit. Okay, phase 2 of that is the next one goes over the top. Again, you have to sort of slide it in behind the rear bars. But same process again, a bit of glue. Now these have to run right to the rear. And so this is one of those areas where you're glad you're using a thicker super glue than a thin one. Because as I said, if you're using a thin one, it dries extremely quickly and probably quicker than you can get this on. Now use quite a bit as you join it to the rear part, because that way you'll fill in a little gap just at this rear section just down here. So when you come along, put some on, just make sure you put plenty in this area here, just on this joint there. You need a little bit more super glue, because this is going to run all the way across the first one and into the back. Okay, so same thing again. Okay, running down the front. So don't overdo it. I've got a little bit too much there, if I'm honest. But I'm sort of doing this for speed rather than neatness. Around the back areas. In there, just a little bit more there. As I say, if you were using a thin, you would have dried at the top now. Then again, all that's going to happen is slide it diagonally down and in. Okay, and the front should be a very nice fit. And this is what we're saying, don't mess around with the fit too much when you're cutting it out, making sure it keeps nice and flat. Got a little bit of a riser at the back here we need to squash in, but try and keep it so it sits on its own accord, if you like. Just a little bit of a nudging around, but don't go in there yanking it down, because as soon as it bends, it's a nightmare to get it to sit properly. So we're just making sure it's all pushed down nice and tight in all the corners. Got a tiny bit of a rise on this back one just here, so what we're going to do is just slip some super glue underneath, just pushing up. I'm going to take my finger to wipe away the excess, and hopefully there's enough to push some underneath. And just to speed things up, just going to bit of kicker just in this rear corner where it's got the problem. Blow it all down. We're just going to kicker the entire thing and give it a blow. And there is that top bit on there, which really, really makes this work. Now, obviously, we've still got bits that are going to go on the top of this as well. We've still got various little boxes up there, but it does do it. But it is quite a nice finish down here. And it's funny how they've done 2 layers of photo etch. Takes care of that little slant between the two absolutely perfectly. So we're really happy how that is. Okay, so what we're going to need to do is now just install the HUD, and then what we can do once the HUD is installed onto it, we can paint it all up.